Als je het te eng vindt, Rob, dan kunnen we altijd nog terug naar camping Eldorado, waar we net langs kwamen.
Welke zieke klootzak vindt dit grappig?
So, welcome, Chris W. Mitchell. We're here with your film, The Pool. And I knew it was from the Netherlands, and then I saw your name, and I thought that doesn't sound like a Dutch name. And now I met you, and you don't sound like you're from the Netherlands. How did you end up making a film in the Netherlands?
Yeah, well, love. It's the best reason of all. No, I fell in love with a Dutch girl 26 years ago in London, and followed her back to Amsterdam, and then stayed there. And then I started my career in the film industry, shall we say, as a cleaner actually, in subtitles. Yeah. And then I worked my way up.
Right. And this is your debut feature? Debut feature,
yeah. I've made various short films and written scripts for other films, but this is my first directorial film, yeah.
But how would you? I've had a hard time trying to describe the plot. How would you? What is The Pool? How would you describe The Pool?
Yeah, it's sort of, there's a satirical element to it, there's a horror thing in it, but it's also a family drama. But a synopsis is there's two bankers who've lost their jobs, who drag their families off into the Dutch wilderness, or what the nearest thing that the Dutch have to wilderness, which is not the same as a Swedish wilderness. And they look for a perfect place to camp, far away from motorways and camping sites, which is again a very difficult thing to do in Holland. But they find it. A wonderful, idyllic little woodland pool, set up their tents, ready for a wonderful vacation, but then there's something in the pool which begins to disturb the equilibrium, let's put it that way.
Yeah. One of the things that I thought was most interesting about the film is the fact that you have these sort of middle-aged characters and then their teenage children, and I think that's a sort of a mix of characters you don't often see in horror films, because most of the times it's teenagers by themselves.
Yes, exactly. One of the first things that we came across when we were trying to get it funded was people saying, indeed, oh, it should just be young people, make it just young people, because that's a horror movie and therefore there should be young people. Well, I think that's the most boring thing in the world. I've seen that 100 times, and also the actors, the older actors are great actors, and so to have them there as a counterbalance to the young teenagers, that makes a whole dynamic which is far more interesting than just a whole bunch of teenagers together in the usual Halloween, Friday the 13th mold.
Right, and there's also just something interesting because they are, you know, relatively, I think there's some things changed because I think teenagers now sort of are allowed to be children for a longer period of time, so they have to hang out with their parents very longer than teenagers did 20 years ago.
Yeah, people aren't adult till they're 30 now, really, are they? Like, I'm 50 now, and I feel like I've now reached adulthood.
The film opens with this sort of very morbid image of a rotting bird. Was that sort of an image you wanted to had in your mind?
Yeah, no, that is to set up the whole what goes on afterwards, because straight after the bird we get into sort of arguing teenagers and adults arguing to typical sort of family life, but that first image is that tells you what we're looking at. We're looking at decay, we're looking at death,
right?
And so by the end of the film that makes perfect sense.
What's the sort of genre film scene like in the Netherlands? Are there a lot of horror films coming out from there?
Now it's getting better. There was a whole period of time when I first moved to Holland that genre films were seen as childish, and that actually if you're going to make a film, it should somehow make people better. Right. You know, there was this educational idea. No entertainment was a sort of side issue. Right. And slowly but surely it's changed now. You do see more thrillers, occasionally horror films. But it's still difficult because to make films in Dutch language, that's such a small language area that you have to rely on the government really for a lot of money, or the TV. And the TV stations do not want to touch a horror film with a barge pole, as we say in England. So that makes it difficult to get things financed. So we had to rely also on crowdfunding to get this made.
So what was the process of the crowdfunding?
Yeah, we set up, it's a very interesting idea from Herman Slachter, who's one of the producers. He set up what is called the New Nederlands Film Platform. Okay. And it's basically a sort of, you pay €6 a month and you become a member. And that means you share in the whole production company's slate. It's not one film that you're financing.
Okay.
You're financing everything they do, and you get then a share of profits if there are ever profits. And that is an interesting way of doing it, because I always found the problem with the crowdfunding one particular film is that it can be a hit, it can be a flop, nobody knows anything in this business. So you're putting all of your eggs in one basket. But this idea is more of a, you can do this then for years if you want to, and slowly but surely more films get made, and slowly you get your money back. That's the idea.
What are some of your favorite horror films? Or?
My favourite horror films, yeah. Well, actually, funnily enough, I'm not a big fan of a lot of horror films. If you see The Pool, you might say, oh yeah, that explains a lot. But I do love The Thing, for example. And I love Rosemary's Baby. So The Exorcist is another classic. That sort of, I like films where reality is played with as well. Sort of mind-bending films, where you're not sure, is this a dream, is this a hallucination? I find those always great fun, like another John Carpenter, In the Mouth of Madness. Yeah. That's fun, I think.
Yeah. Now, there is some sort of entity or some sort of spirit or something in the pool.
Don't give it away.
I was wondering, does that tap in any way into sort of Dutch folklore, or is it some sort of...
Yeah, well, European folklore, I think. I mean, I was originally inspired by an English folklore story, Jenny Greenteeth, which is like a witch troll who lives in woodland pools and snatches uncareful children that walk past and drags them down to an underwater nest. But there's also in Holland, there's the idea of the witte wieven, as they're called, which are like mists which attract people to wander off the path and get drown in like bogs and swamps. And I think all over Europe, probably here in Sweden too, there are sort of stories of things that live in pools, because it's an archetypal fear. I think drowning is an archetypal fear, and things in the dark. It's the world over.
Well, thank you so much for your time, and it was great to have you.
My pleasure.
Ik zag iets in het water.
Denk je dat papa aan het doordraaien is?